Hello and welcome to Dig List, the latest episode of the Quarry's podcast. We're focusing in on skills in Guernsey, and joining me today, Louise Misselke and Kieran James. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to see you.
Now, I think we're keen to start busting some myths straight away. We hear talk of a skills crisis.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting phenomenon that wherever we go, we hear about skills crisis and skills gap. And my question is, what skills are we talking about? Because I know in the work that we do in the Guernsey Institute, working with lots of different employers, that if I speak to one group of employers from one sector, they will talk about skills in a different set of skills compared to another sector. So always got to ask, what skills are we actually talking about? And I wonder as well, in our context, whether it's skills or whether it's labour. Have we got enough people in the population, if you like, to fill the jobs that we need to be done? And that's a whole different discussion. But I suppose I always ask back a question when you're talking about skills. What do you mean? Do you mean some employability skills that might be labelled sort of soft skills, or do you mean technical knowledge? Do you mean wider learning? You know, what are you talking about when we talk about skills? Because my interpretation it will even be different to Kieran's, and we're educationalists, and it will be different to yours, and it will be different to whoever else I speak to. So it's very difficult to define.
I think where we've explored this previously, and Louise and I work very closely, but there are skills like plumbing skills or bricklaying skills that perhaps aren't where the skills shortage might be, where employers are crying out for a skill, saying there's a skills shortage. They might be talking about what we talked about, employability skills or soft skills, collaboration or teamwork or resilience. And first of all, are they skills or are they actually dispositions? And secondly, can they be taught? That's the next question. And they're two different kinds of interpretations of what skills are, even if they are skills. And then if I give an example, teamwork or adaptability or resilience or collaboration, or analysis, if somebody's good at analysing in mathematics, that doesn't mean they're going to be good at analysing in art history, let alone analysing in a medical profession. And the other thing that often comes up is that skills are transferable. Well, just because you're good at analysing something as an accountant doesn't make you good at analysing something as a doctor. Otherwise, we'd all be just transferring from one role to another with no additional training. So it's a much more complex area. And I think what we found is the more we ask employers, what skills do you mean, the harder it is to pin those down.
Yeah, definitely.
And given that complexity of it, how do you even begin to start to get into what you need to do as educationalists? And I guess we can broaden that out later as well, because it's not just about what you do in education, is it?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. So from my perspective, the first starting point is we are here to meet the needs of our stakeholders. And in technical, vocational and professional education, our stakeholders are employers and the learners and the students. So what curriculum are we offering that meets the needs of the employment sectors locally? Have we got the right stuff in that curriculum? Is the content what employers need? But also, really importantly, our students, have we got the right pathways for students to be able to progress through levels of qualification, if you like, into meaningful work, employment, or higher or further learning? So that's always the starting point. And one of the things that's really, really evident, particularly in our apprenticeship offer, is that co-creation of the curriculum, which we're really able to do here across the bailiwick, is work with employers to create the offer in any sort of bundle of learning.
And I guess that's a real strength of the island, isn't it? That you can react quite quickly to these circumstances.
I think because we've got quite a direct democracy, we've got quite direct links with our whole community on the island, people can contact us, whether they're employers, parents, students, families, grandmas. We get feedback very, very quickly about the provision that we're putting in place. I would just add to Louise's answer that who are we doing this for as educators? Who are we doing this for? And it's interesting, obviously, coming from a technical and vocational perspective, that Louise talks about employers and students as being the two kind of main stakeholders. For us at the Sixth Form Centre, we wouldn't view employers as a primary stakeholder. The students would be our primary stakeholder, because we're not. And it is a difference in the remit of our institutions, but we're not preparing them solely for employment. Because we're not providing just that vocational direction straight away, which obviously, understandably, is a slight difference in the emphasis. So our primary stakeholders as our students, we are not just preparing them for employment, although of course we are preparing them for employment. We're preparing them for further study, as Louise has said, but we're also preparing them potentially to be our future, in fact, our current citizens. They can vote at this age, so they need to be aware of global and local issues too, as do the students at the college. They need to be potentially preparing for parenthood, for family life, to be confident individuals themselves, to be autonomous learners, to feel like they have a direction and self-efficacy in their lives. The preparation for a job is a small part of what we're trying to do. We're trying to create young people, young adults, our future for the island and for the world. So that focus on just preparing people for employment isn't what we're all about.
Yeah, I think you've made a really good point. And one of the points that we have to remember, particularly when we talk about skills, because one of the other myths is that education should just teach the skills that people need. And what we have to remember is that's a really complex thing to get your head around, because skills in a young person are shaped by the experience that they have. And so it can't be just education that has a role to play in shaping those skills. We know from the IOD Social Capital Report that was published last year, and also the Community Foundation's Quality of Life Report, that we in our community have an increasingly disconnected community with a growing divide around economic prosperity, with groups of people that are really struggling. Now, if your experience as a young person is that you're very fortunate that you've been off island to holidays, let's say in Europe or further afield, you're going to have better understanding of the skills of navigation and travel and understanding what the world looks like than a young person who hasn't perhaps had those opportunities and maybe hasn't even been to Herm. And so that what's really important as educators, we have got to start where that young person is at. And what might be really good for one young person around, team working opportunities might not be needed for another young person who might have no resilience, for example, because of their life circumstance. So it's quite difficult to suggest that there's a bucket that's going to be like the halcyon of what we should be providing, because we have to start where people are at.
And actually, on that note, therefore, that responsibility doesn't just sit with education. I mean, otherwise, everything sits with education all the time, and we end up with everything from toothbrushing to I don't know, as I say, parenting skills sitting with education. Actually, this is a community. It takes a village. It takes a community to raise a child, and that is genuinely true. And it's even more so in Guernsey. It is about how do we together, collaboratively, make sure that our young people are prepared for their futures. And also the point about what does the future even look like? We don't know what their future is going to look like. The best we can do by the time they reach 18 or 19 is that they are confident in themselves. They're confident they can learn. They're confident they can respond to setbacks. They're confident that they can adapt to whatever the uncertain future is going to look like. And the way to replicate that is by giving them experiences where they build that confidence, because I think we'll talk about AI a little bit later on, but who knows where we're going to be in 5 years, let alone in 15 or 25 years. And if I go back to when I left school, the world is a completely different place, and I'm doing a job that I never anticipated would be the job that I would do, and so are many of my peers in industries that didn't even exist. So those are the most important attributes and situations that the students can be in.
Within your day-to-day settings, do you think you have that flexibility to adapt and adjust to individual needs?
Yes, and we do it every moment, every hour in any educational setting. I mean, some of the ways that we will support that wider learning that Kieran's talked about there is, project-based learning, where we might give students what we would call a live project. Sometimes that's given by employers. They have to research that. They have to come up with a solution. They might have to present a solution that might involve teamwork. They might not do so well, or it might fail. That's great, because that's all learning about resilience and picking yourself up after a disappointment. So some of those softer employability skills we weave throughout the curriculum to make sure that those things are sort of built in. And also in terms of starting where people are at and taking them, forward as an individual package, that is just part and parcel of what every education establishment does. Because yes, we think about the whole, but it's really important to think about the individual. And I will just say, because the oldest student in the Guernsey Institute is 84, we're not just talking about young people, we're also talking about lifelong learning. And part of the work that we do, and that confidence for our younger learners, our 16 to 18-year-olds across our two institutions, are about creating and inspiring a thirst for lifelong learning and being always able to be curious about the world that we live in.
And just just to add to that, I think the other thing to say is the curriculum that we offer, they're not flash in the pan curricula. They've stood the test of time. I mean, I know we'll talk about this a bit later on as well, but we offer curriculum in language, we offer curriculum in philosophy, we offer curriculum in mathematics, we offer a curriculum in science, we offer a curriculum in technology. We offer a curriculum in construction. These have been around for thousands of years. Because they've stood the test of time, they prepare young people for the life ahead of them, regardless of where that takes them. And these have been professions for millennia. That's where the curriculum that we provide provides that kind of foundation for whatever the young people then go on to do, which I think is a really key thing.
Sorry, I guess that ability, just thinking in terms of future employment. We know now that it's not going to be just about going into one job for the rest of your career, and that's what we're going to be doing. So, how are we setting people up with that as well?
I think one of the interesting things about what you've just said is I know that when I left formal education, because I am a lifelong learner and all the qualifications I've done subsequent to leaving school have been whilst I've been working, I don't think the message was that I would have a job and a career for life. I think it was, you need to be prepared to change and adapt. And really, that message hasn't changed, although we know there's some startling statistic. I think it was the World Economic Forum put out that it's likely that by the time you're 30, you're going to have 17 different types of jobs. Yes, you are. And you are going to have to adapt. And that's one of the things that's really important about the work that we do in education settings, is helping people to understand and learn how to learn, so that whatever life sideswipes you with, you can adapt and be flexible and know that there's a place where you can go to get more skills, to get more knowledge, to pivot if you need to.
And I guess that leads us quite nicely as well into the influence of AI and what that could mean. And I guess we're only really starting to see the opening part of that debate as well. How are you coping with this?
I mean, in terms of the impact of AI at the moment for us, it is there. Students can use it. What we've been very careful to tell our students is, apart from obviously the rules around plagiarism and you've got to submit work that's your own, and is actually that we've got a bit of saying now that those who do the thinking get the learning. So if AI has done all your work for you, your brain hasn't done any thinking, you won't have any learning to take away either into your exams or into later life. So AI is a tool like everything else. Now, it can be incredibly helpful as a tool for certain tasks, but if you don't know how to use the tool, or you don't have any, you need the knowledge. You need knowledge of the domain that you're developing expertise in. AI is there to help you potentially to get the knowledge, and what it's fabulous for from an education point of view is giving feedback to learners. For example, here's an assignment they've done, here's an essay they've written, here's a mathematical piece of work they've done. AI can tell them how well they've done, what mark they might have got, what they could do to improve next time. But AI can't be responsible for doing the thinking, because at that point, the student has outsourced thinking to AI, in which case they've also not learnt anything. The work has been done without any cognitive load in their brains, which means they won't have learnt anything. And our entire purpose is to get them to learn. So AI, like all sorts of tools in the past, is there and is helpful, but it's not something that can develop expertise in people. And I think that kind of brings us to the question of, again, going back to what is the purpose of education, and indeed what is the purpose of employment? Is it to generate revenue for multinationals, or is it for the personal development of human beings? I'll leave that there.
That's a big question, Kieran.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to explore that a bit more.
Okay, well, I think so. Imagine a world where all the work could be done by robots and AI. Then where does that leave human beings? Because actually, we've evolved for in the savannas of Africa, for example, to live in a world of scarcity where we are hunter-gatherers, or we're farming, we're doing basic sustenance for our lives. And now we're in a world where we're potentially on the brink of not just having abundance of food, but abundance of leisure. Is that actually what's going to bring fulfillment and happiness? Because if it's not, are we going down the right path? What's the point if actually we're not going to be fulfilled and happy as people?
What kind of feedback do you get from your students about the world that they're facing up to in the future at the moment? You said they're a key stakeholder in all of this.
For the younger students that come into the Guernsey Institute, I don't see a huge difference in their approach to their future. I think we know that we've got higher numbers of young people with anxiety and mental health problems. And there's that could be a whole other podcast on some of the explanations for that. But young people are worried about whether they are going to have the job that they want, the life that they want. I think they're very realistic about the values that they hold dear to their hearts, and that's what they want to see in the life that they lead. And they want to work for people that have the similar values that they have. That's really, really important. But I'm not sure it's necessarily hugely different if I spoke to young people from sort of 10 years ago. I think what I am seeing is a sort of increasing awareness amongst the adult learners that we have about the amazing power of learning and how that can help in terms of career shifting or upskilling for promotions and those sorts of things, and that learning and that knowledge being really important to get. We had our higher education awards ceremony this week, which was really, really inspirational. And to see the students that were collecting awards, they've all been working and learning at the same time. And that's really humbling to know that there are people out there that are lifelong learners. And so that adaptation is really, really important.
Do you feel there's been maybe an overemphasis in the past few years about buildings, money being spent on the structures and that our children are learning in, and not enough focus on curriculum and skills, or have we got the balance right?
The word overemphasis is a apt choice of words. I think there has been an emphasis on curriculum and skills at the educational level. We've spent most of our time focusing on curriculum and developing the curriculum across primary, across secondary, and across post-16. But that hasn't been on the front page of the press. That hasn't been in the media. What's been in the media has been building. So I think the emphasis hasn't necessarily been the thing that we've been working on particularly, although we've both been working on buildings too. But we all know the most important impact on young people's learning are going to be the teachers that they have in front of them. And having continuity of highly skilled teachers is going to have a bigger impact than most other things. But as Louise has said, we've got to work with where the young people are when they come to us, and they come from a variety of different backgrounds and starting points. So that's also the element of a skilled teacher, which is why when we talk about AI, I think there are some really brilliant things that AI can do in terms of learning, but I can't yet imagine a time when an AI can engage every single disadvantaged and disenfranchised young learner that we have better than a human being can. That seems to me to be a very long way off. So AI may well actually advantage the most advantaged further, but in terms of supporting the most disadvantaged young people, motivating them, inspiring them, the word Louise used before, that seems to me to be quite far off for AI. Going back to your question about buildings, I think buildings have very much been in the political arena for obvious reasons. Has there been an overemphasis? I don't think there's been an overemphasis. I think we're both in buildings that are probably past their sell-by date, but the teaching and learning that goes on in those classrooms is still the most important thing by a long way.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I wanted to add about the AI kind of question and what will the future hold, because there could be an argument, couldn't there, that AI is going to take over education and therefore we don't need buildings at all. But I don't think that is the case, and I know that isn't the case, because during the pandemic, what we learned really quickly is that people need people. And whilst we converted really quickly to online learning, what our learners missed was the ability to have connection conversations where they could go, what did you think about that? I'm not sure. And it's not the same in a breakout room, in a Google Classroom or a Teams meeting. That kind of human conversation can't happen.
Well, we could have recorded this podcast virtually, couldn't we? But we didn't. We're all in the room together.
We're all in the room together. And I think we don't know, nobody can predict what the future is going to look like in terms of employment and, that whole notion of the fourth world industrial revolution and technology and taking over all the jobs. Well, there's also a school of thought that once it's going to evolve, it's not going to erupt. And two, that actually, whilst technology and artificial intelligence may disrupt some jobs, it may also create many more jobs that we don't yet know exist. And that's where those higher level thinking skills and higher level knowledge acquisition is going to be really important. And reading recently about the fifth world industrial revolution, which is a synergy between AI technology and the nature of being human. It's how humans can navigate through that world to really flourish.
We need to create a world that is the world that we want as humans, not a world that is driven by a different purpose. I think that's we're way off the topic of education and skills. But our job as educators is to create young people who create the world. So, but that is fundamentally, I think we need to look at the bigger picture and what is the role of business in terms of developing humanity and society. As Louise says, human beings are social animals. Being stuck in a room plugged into a computer or a VR world is not actually the most fulfilling thing. And probably I would hate to see the world, the jobs that Louise referring to being the jobs of therapists and psychologists helping young people because they are increasingly anxious because they haven't experienced the social bonding of the society that's existed for many, many thousands of years.
I'd like to explore, going back to one of the earlier points you made about the community-wide effort that we need in this sphere as well. So it's not just about the schools and what you do as educationists. So how does that work on the ground in reality? How are you connecting out with different community groups?
I think we might need another podcast to sort of answer that question. So one of the things that's really important is we think about what our offer is, and we've talked about that for technical and vocational education. We need to think about industry and employers because we put courses on at the demand of employers. So that's really important. We also think about the learner and setting them up for further higher learning, employment and life. But then also, as educationists, as part of the community, an integral part of the community, we do work with our significant community partners. Now, we're all citizens of the island, so you can argue that when we meet with employers or when we meet with learners or when we meet with parents or grandparents, that we're engaging with the community in that way. So I think those conversations happen organically, but they also happen in kind of events that we do, parents' evenings, consultation. We go out and share the post-16 curriculum into schools with the school pupils who are going to be future students, but also with parents and also with the school community. So I think probably a day doesn't go by without someone in both of our organisations engaging with a wider community.
There's no question that that's exactly what happens. We're jointly presenting to secondary school teachers on Monday, to all of our secondary school teachers from a post-16 perspective. Yesterday, we had students from Year 11 coming to the Sixth Form Centre. Today, we're doing this podcast with you. I don't think engagement and interaction with our community partners is an add-on to our curriculum. It is part and parcel of what we do every day, both of us in terms of our organisations. So just to add to what Louise said, as well as parents and students and employers, we're working with the third sector on a regular basis. Our students are going out and volunteering. I mean, on our new site at Lamar de Carteret, we've got the primary school next door. Our students are already going in there and helping the little ones with their reading, with their sport, with all sorts of different activities. We invite our deputies in to come and engage with our students, and we have actually every year we have a deputies forum where our students invite deputies in and then give them a good grilling of questions that are asked. I've been contacted by a deputy today to ask if they can come and speak to our students. So, as Louise says, not a day goes by when we aren't interacting with many members of our community from many different areas. Our students yesterday were at an IOD event down at the Valet. Yes. It's a daily occurrence.
Yeah.
We can do a little bit of rapid fire now.
Okay.
On the myths. Give me one of the thing that's most on your top of your agenda for the myths that you feel we should bust.
Yeah, so I get really cross when I hear, well, it's all about skills, and we should just teach skills. We shouldn't, we shouldn't teach any knowledge. But I think I might have mentioned it already. If we go right back to Greek philosophy, Aristotle talked about epistemology, the knowledge. Talked about, I'm not going to say it right. Kieran, probably correct me. Techne, which is technical application, and then. Hang on. I think it's phronesis, which is practical wisdom. And what we know is you can't do stuff without knowing stuff. You have to know what you're doing. If I think about our carpentry and carpentry and joinery learners, they have a huge amount of theory and critical thinking that they apply in practice. Yes, they are developing those physical, practical skills, but they have to be able to know what they're doing and why they're doing it and apply it to every different circumstance within which they're in. And that is true expertise. So I think that's one of the, we talk about skills and we hear that, we just need to focus on skills, but actually you have to know stuff.
Can I take that even further? The latest thinking in terms of cognitive science is that there isn't a difference between knowledge and skills. It's all knowledge. There's declarative knowledge, you can 1066 and all that, and there's procedural knowledge, knowing how to do things. But the brain stores them in very much the same way. Well, some are about how we move our arms, to do things, to hit a tennis ball. Some are about how we can recall dates or, formulae or something. And indeed, between there's things like remembering your times tables, and there's things like knowing how to multiply when there aren't the ones that you've remembered that you can recall. Instead, you can work through, the process, and then you know the process, so you can then undertake the process. So, declarative knowledge, recalling things, and procedural knowledge, knowing how to do things, being able to do things, are both kinds of knowledge. Skills are a kind of knowledge. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they are all domain specific. So as I said before, I think analysis in mathematics might look very different from analysis in English. They aren't transferable. They are different. They are domain specific skills. We call them analysis, but they aren't the same kind of analysis. Otherwise, we'd all be transferring from one. I know I could be a doctor tomorrow and an accountant the next day. It doesn't work like that.
I think one of the other things that I recently was in a meeting, and there was a lot of conversation about employer-ready skills. We might call them soft skills. Confidence, being able to look somebody in the eye, being able to shake someone's hand. Going into a workplace and having the confidence to ask, what do you need me to do? Being able to work in a team, being able to, research. All of those are really important attributes that we would want every single learner, whatever their age, to have as part of their learning journey. But as I think I might have said, that's also really individual specific, and it's not just the responsibility of education to help people develop those attributes. That's also the responsibility of the wider community, and as they step into employment, if it is their first employment, that's also some of that responsibility is for the employer to bring out those attributes in the way that they need for their business. And also the other point that we made earlier is it's really difficult to help somebody learn resilience, which is one that's often talked about, if they've had a different life experience from somebody else. And so you've got to start where that person is at. You can't go, today we're all going to learn resilience if somebody has got already an abundance of resilience and somebody else has got none. You have to start where the person is at. And actually it might be more important for that person who hasn't got resilience to have something else that's more of a priority at that time.
I'll just build on the point Louise made there, that students don't leave our institutions work ready. They leave our institutions readier. But of course, we have hundreds of students coming through our organisations each year, and they go on to hundreds of different destinations. And 5 years down the line, they're in completely new industries, completely new jobs that maybe didn't even exist 5 years before. Yeah. So to argue that it's down to educators to prepare them for the world of work, when the world of work could mean anything and everything, it would be an impossible ask. So yes, if we're failing at that, because it would be impossible to prepare our young people for every possible job that they could go into. That there's a lot of that on-the-job training that needs to be done on the job. What we can do, Now, and that's where we slightly differ in our remits, because obviously some of the work that, or many of Louise's students are doing as apprentices, they're doing on the job training, or in vocational and technical, they are preparing for a particular role. But still, where they end up 5-10 years down the line is not where they started. They'll go into management, they'll go into leadership, they might go into entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
We just don't know. So the best we can do is to prepare them with as much knowledge as possible, knowledge of both kinds, and the self-confidence and as much resilience as we can get them to have in the time we have, that they can go forward and fly.
I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about what we're doing for adults, because learning just doesn't stop when you leave the school at 16 or 18.
And I think, as Kieran said earlier, lifelong learning is really important. And for our younger learners, we're setting them up to be curious about their future and to continue working and learning. But in terms of adult skills, we've got some really exciting things that are happening through the Guernsey Institute. First of all, we know that there's adults in our population that might not have got a GCSE in English and maths. They might have, for example, left school before they did that, because the raising of the school leaving age from 15 to 16 in Guernsey happened in 2008, and they might not have achieved that yet. Also, we are aware from our work with employers that there's some people in our community that don't have great digital skills, and the whole world is moving online to just take part in the society within which we live. I mean, we all have to do online tax returns, don't we? So we are able to provide free English and maths and also digital skills for anyone in the community that doesn't have those vital qualifications, or doesn't have them but needs to improve those skills that they've got to get to a place where they would like to take them. We're out in the community delivering English and maths and digital skills, and we're also delivering ESOL, which is English for Speakers of Other Languages, and that's all free of charge, which is really fantastic. We're also about to launch some really exciting projects. One of them I know that I think you know about, which is one of the conversations that we have quite a lot when we're out working with employers, is the sort of brain drain. We lose all our graduates, and then they go off to university and then they don't come back. We have got a project that's just starting, looking at how we can, as a community, attract those graduates back to the island to work in some of our amazing places. This project is called Grad Routes, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about that. And then there's two other pieces of work that we're just starting, which are, again, are really exciting, looking at how we can provide adults in the community who don't have a full level 3 qualification yet. So that's an A-level equivalent qualification or a vocational qualification at level 3. If they don't have that yet, being able to offer that to them. And if they don't have a level 3 and they might need a level 2, which is a GCSE equivalent qualification, looking at how we can offer that to them. There's still a lot more work that needs to happen around that. And that's working with our employer partners to sort of define what that's going to look like. But in the coming months, we'll be able to launch that out to the wider community about how to access those qualifications, and they will be free of charge, which is very exciting. And then the last one is looking at how we can develop for our adult population some micro-credentialing, which is a really interesting way of learning. And actually, when I think about our post-16 learners, our younger learners, it's sort of an approach to learning that we probably do a lot in the curriculum, which is bite-sized learning. We know that particularly for our younger learners, attention is a challenge, but also the same is true for adults. And we also know from research that if you achieve something, if you do a course for an hour and you achieve it, it stimulates and motivates you to learn something else. And so to try and help and support that love of learning and also the desire to upskill, we are looking at how we can develop and offer a series of micro-credentials. They're called small bite-sized qualifications that might build up to larger qualifications. So we're just exploring that at the moment. So those are 4 projects that are happening in the adult skills space, which are really, really exciting.
And just finally, do you see any key challenges over the next 2 years, and what would they be?
In terms of this whole concept of skills, do you know what? I don't see challenges. I just see opportunities. I think that just even this conversation has sparked some thinking for me about some things that we might do, some different approaches that we might take. But there's only ever opportunities, because we're incredibly lucky, aren't we, Kieran, to work in jobs where every single day is different, and we can be inspired completely by the work of the people that we're supporting, whether that's our younger learners, that, you know, together we support the post-16 space, or whether that's somebody who is 52 and has just got a GCSE in maths. You know, that's an inspirational achievement. So it's only opportunities. I don't see them as challenges, and I actually think it's really important to frame that in that way, because the world is changing, but isn't that exciting? You know, what's it going to be? I don't know, but that's also exciting.
I feel like I might be negative.
Kieran.
I think there's a risk. The AI does present a risk because, as I said before, those who do the thinking do the learning, and if young people or employers or anybody else think they can outsource that thinking and still get the same outcome, then they're mistaken. Now, that's an opportunity for us to educate our young people, and indeed through this podcast to educate the wider community that is a risk, and therefore it's an opportunity to make sure that doesn't happen, because I think that is a potential misconception of the benefit of AI. There are absolutely huge benefits, but in terms of education, we need to be careful about how we use AI, and I think probably in terms of employment as well. What we don't want to do is outsource all the joys of being a human being, and those joys include struggle, cognitive struggle, challenge, thinking. We've just talked about a lot of reading and podcasts that we listen to. That's all part of the joy of being human. You don't want to outsource those to an AI to do it all for you. So I think it's a risk, but I think it's a risk that we're cognizant of and addressing.
I think we can finish up there. I like to finish on opportunity. I think that's a great way of thinking about it. And I'd just like to thank you both for your time.
Thank you. It's been a great chat.
It's been a pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast. If you've got all this way, I'm really hoping that you've enjoyed our work. There's a few things you can do though to support us. Follow, like, subscribe, share, whatever you can do to help spread the word of the Quarry. The other thing you can do is head on over to our website, where you can become a member and really support independent local news.